spoke to a woman yesterday or maybe the day before, and she was diagnosed at 50 and is, 2 years into her diagnosis and burnt out. And whether you're burnt out at 50 or 15 or 5, it requires a lot of thought and motivation. And the biggest thing is just knowing the self-awareness and knowing when you're at that point where you are really struggling and feel like you need some help beyond, asking a spouse or someone for a break or a day, not necessarily a day off, but there's a lot of work and effort that goes into diabetes. So it's trying to maintain that balance, but also having the self-awareness and the drive to reach out when you feel like you just can't do it all.
Welcome to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. My name is Melissa Slemp, a certified nutritional health coach and the founder and CEO of Abundant Health with Melissa, where I help women with type 1 diabetes to feel more empowered and live their best life despite their diagnosis. Each week, I will bring conversations and strategies from guest experts and my experience living with type 1 for over 40 years now. So if you're a woman ready to redefine how diabetes can look and feel for you, then the Type 1 and Midlife podcast is the show for you. In today's episode, we welcome Anna Sabino. She's an exceptional individual with over 30 years of experience living with type 1 diabetes, and her expertise lies in emotional health counseling as a Master of Social Work and Certified Diabetes Care and Education Specialist. And she's specifically tailored for individuals and families navigating life with T1D. She addresses a range of topics here with us, including family dynamics, crisis management, anxiety, depression, burnout, and post-traumatic stress related to diabetes. Anna's deep connection to the T1D community was nurtured through her involvement in diabetes summer camps throughout her childhood. With almost 2 decades of experience in creating and overseeing youth and family programs, she has collaborated with esteemed organizations such as the College Diabetes Network, International Diabetes Federation, the American Diabetes Association, and the T1D Exchange. Anna's primary passion lies in empowering individuals and families, helping them gain confidence and to find comfort in managing their diabetes. In this episode, we delve into Anna's vast knowledge, exploring strategies for emotional well-being, overcoming challenges associated with T1D, and fostering resilience. Get ready to be inspired by Anna's expertise, compassion, and unwavering commitment to make a positive impact on the lives of those affected by T1D. Just a reminder that nothing you hear on this Type 1 and Midlife podcast should be a substitute for professional medical advice. Please always consult your medical professional before changing your diet, insulin dosages, or healthcare plan. Well, hello and welcome. I am here today joined by Anna Sabino. And again, I'm so excited you're here. And you're going to come and share your own story with type 1 diabetes for over 30 years now and talk about your work with helping individuals and families with T1D. And we're going to kind of just go over, again, your story, your family dynamics, and transitioning to motherhood and parenting while just trying to maintain our mental stability and health with diabetes. So welcome, Anna. Happy you are.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself as far as your diagnosis story, if you don't mind sharing that, and maybe how I think people are just interested in how other people, and I don't think it's a judgment or a comparison thing, but just how other people manage their diabetes, whether it's pump, MDI, CGM.
Yeah, Yep, absolutely. I feel like the diagnosis story is much like a birth story. When you're first become a mom, everybody loves to share how your kind of birth story panned out. And I feel like with diabetes, it's that bond of the diagnosis story and all that. So I was diagnosed way back in 1989 as a new 6-year-old. And, this was when I think, meters were pretty new. Obviously, no such thing as a cell phone in sight for many years. I was pretty sick, had a lot of IVs. I remember vividly carrying the IV pole with me on the pediatric ward, like just to the restroom. I had a bedpan, pretty near coma. Blood sugar, they said around like 950. But yeah, I had all the warning signs. My mom said I was just like licking my lips because they were so dry from thirst. And the night before I was diagnosed, was vomiting. They tried to give me ginger ale and just kind of eventually put two and two together and called the pediatrician. They said, put me in the bathtub after I had sort of been vomiting. And they thought, it was a virus. It was right around Martin Luther King. So it was January. So like, height of illness season. And then after I started sort of gulping the water from the bathtub, they called back and said, I think I know what's going on here. Meet me at the ER. And then the rest is history from there. But, when I was discharged, I was 6. And I don't, my daughter is approaching that age right now. And I think about what my memories are, at her age. And I have memories, but not a ton now that I'm like newly 40 in terms of day-to-day living and life prior to that sort of like monumental diagnosis, which so many people who are diagnosed even just a little bit later likely have. So, fast forward several years later, my parents were very big overnight summer camp people. So when I was approaching that age, in elementary school, there was like one other kiddo in my school that had type 1, but it was very not talked about. I, growing up, had 2 shots a day, and it was very ignorance is bliss. I only went to the nurse to check my blood sugar if I felt off, or my mom sent in a written note to the teacher to let them know that they wanted me to monitor it, but I didn't give insulin at lunchtime. So throughout the school day, I never thought about diabetes, probably until high school. It was I just didn't know what my blood sugar was most of the time as a kindergartner through 8th grade, which is ridiculous to think about now. And I also feel like, I feel so much for these moms who have kids who are diagnosed with these kiddos, because it is a lot to take on. Not that it wasn't 34 years ago, but it's just different. So I went to summer camp and then realized that diabetes was my passion from a career standpoint, and was put on a pump because of my experiences at camp. When I was about 20, after my first year of college, I was like, it's really a better experience with this updated technology. And I currently live just north of Boston with my husband and 2 kiddos, and wear a T-Slim and a Dexcom G6.
Nice. Wow. Our stories are similar. I was diagnosed in 82. But
okay.
And again, that's 7 years difference, but it doesn't sound like the information was not out there, as we both know. Internet wasn't.
No, there was no computers in classrooms.
Yeah. So, and I was the same sort of way. It was just, we took our shot. All right. I talk about myself. I took my shot, ate what I ate, thought I knew what I was doing. I didn't test as often. I mean, I didn't even have a glucometer. Glucometers were a new thing, weren't readily available. So just like you, it was, just a little ignorance.
I don't know if it was like ignorance. It was just, that's what we had available. So, that's what was prescribed to us. I remember my mom would bring me a tray, and it had a paper towel on it, and it had the meter that was, bigger than my, big iPhone now. And it took 120 seconds. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was a process, it was so much more than just a quick glance at a phone or a watch. You had to add an extra kind of 10 minutes in your day because it took 120 seconds to get that reading. So, and there was no carb counting either. So it was this very much, I remember my mom said she would count out 22 goldfish, and, we used the exchange system, which
Yes,
was,
we did, didn't we?
in order to eat healthy, this meant a certain amount of grapes and a certain number of X, Y, and Z. And it was a bit more restricting. But that's just the way
That's
of the
just
world.
what we knew.
That's just what it was. And I bet in 20 years, we'll look back and be like, remember that time we had to wear a pump and the site only lasted 3 days? Like, maybe in 20 years we'll be having implantable pumps and never have to change it. Who knows?
I know.
So very lucky where we are, looking back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And we can't foresee the future, but we know it's only going to get better. So, there's the hope for sure.
Absolutely. But I look at these kids and I think about how much weight they have on their shoulders from the world today. And we just didn't have that kind of knowledge. And it's good, but it's also very overwhelming.
Too much
for everybody. Maybe. Yeah, sometimes it's too much. I do a lot of work with parents on trying to get them to, put their phone down. And, they're walking around with 5.5 A1Cs, and that was just unheard of, 30 years ago. First, I mean, not unheard of, but it was a lot more challenging because we did not have the equipment to have the data. And make those quick decisions to try to mimic what the blood sugar was doing 24/7. And now we do, which is just incredible.
And it sounds like you're helping your patients with that balance. The women that I coach, it is that at what point does diabetes, how much does diabetes play into your thoughts? That's a wide open question. Because we don't want it to control our days, but we want to be aware without it being, like we're micromanaging it, we're being hyper vigilant without losing ourselves in life. So
you're right. That is a loaded question. And, most days I don't, but some days I'm just like, wow, what would it be like if I didn't have my entire professional journey be dedicated to diabetes and also live it? I also feel like, I've worked in diabetes for 20 years now, and I tried to not work in diabetes because of that. And I was very passionate my first 2 years out of school with working with the American Cancer Society and doing event planning, and I loved it. But my calling and my gut just kept feeling this void and wanting to help parents, really specifically, after working as a counselor and then as a director at the diabetes camp level, and just felt like I could contribute so much more. But with my own private practice now, what I really strive for is for parents, especially, regardless of the duration of diabetes, just to build a foundation of confidence wherever you're at in your diagnosis. I spoke to a woman yesterday or maybe the day before, and she was diagnosed at 50 and is, 2 years into her diagnosis and burnt out. And whether you're burnt out at 50 or 15 or 5, it requires a lot of thought and motivation. And the biggest thing is just knowing the self-awareness and knowing when you're at that point where you are really struggling and feel like you need some help beyond, asking a spouse or someone for a break or a day, not as necessarily a day off, but there's a lot of work and effort that goes into diabetes. So it's trying to maintain that balance, but also having the self-awareness and the drive to reach out when you feel like you just can't do it all.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. And that's another thing that's helped us recently is, the amount of outreach and the community support. And, it wasn't there when I was growing up, even through my 20s and 30s. So that is a good thing. There's definitely, because, for many years, I did diabetes alone. I know a lot of people did, thinking, and that just puts more stress on it. And you feel more isolated. And you feel more like the oddball, as I say. So the communities, is that something that you're a part of as well?
For sure. Yeah. I, like you, there really wasn't much, there was the ADA or the JDRF like walks, in terms of seeing people in person. But that was more from a fundraising standpoint, but camp for me, it was the really only in-person sort of long-term support that I had growing up. And so I'm a giant advocate for summer camp, for kids with diabetes. I feel so happy when I am there because I feel normal. And I say that now around my colleagues who also live with type 1. And it's this level of unspoken understanding and invisibility that other people around you just get it. And I know I'm speaking to the choir, but I can't tell you the number of times I work with clients who have told me they've never met anyone with type 1 before. Yeah, and that just breaks my heart because I know that people may live in remote areas or don't have the access or the drive, especially in the last 3 years with a lot of the COVID shutdowns. It just hasn't been there. Yeah. So whether it's online support or not, I'm very involved with ADCES, which is the American Association for Diabetes Care and Education Specialists, as a diabetes educator. So I attend and speak at a lot of conferences. And, I think as someone who works from home full time, you have to kind of stay involved. I also work as a mental health clinician with Gary Shiner's group, Integrated Diabetes Services. So, very, very connected with them. And almost all of us live with type 1, which is an amazing opportunity to get tips and tricks. And we have a text thread. And I encourage anybody listening to just reach out. I have never connected with another type 1 that right off the bat is like, I don't want to talk about diabetes, especially if there's someone else who gets it.
It's instant bonding, isn't it?
Right. It's this instant bonding. And so, I encourage people to put that Dexcom on their arm. I can't tell you the number of times people are like, oh, hey, nice Dexcom, like waiting in line at the grocery store. So it's those sort of little moments that are these teachable opportunities to find that connection, whatever it is.
Yeah, such good points. It really is. I'm connected to, I don't know if you're familiar with Diabetes Sisters.
Oh yeah, they're an amazing group. Yep.
Yes. And we're going to be featuring them here on the podcast in future episodes as well. So stay tuned. I know, and it's about that awareness, but how many women I've met that weren't even aware of Diabetes Sisters. So, and it takes a little effort, because obviously you can do the search, you can do your own, online search for it and find it. But it's like you say, I think maybe at some point some women get used to doing it alone. And maybe they're more comfortable in their own zone doing it alone, not realizing that there is help out there. And when there is, it's like you say, I was at my local farmers market just a few weeks ago. And the same as you, I wear my Dexcom on my arm. And this young lady walked up to me. And yes, it's instant joy. Oh my gosh, you have T1D, because she had her pump on her arm. So yeah, it's and everyone around you is looking like, what is wrong with those people? But they recognize that, they experience it. And I think it gives us an opportunity to help educate other people around us because maybe they're overhearing our conversation, which is great. But yeah, to find that joy in that connection.
I really feel like it's just confidence practice, and it takes a lot. It takes years, and it takes a lot of encouragement, and it takes being around the right type of people in order to get yourself there. And I hate to go back to talking about the pandemic, but I've been doing a lot of work with parents, especially who have been diagnosed over the, during the pandemic, where there really hasn't been camps, there hasn't been in person, and we've been wearing masks physically and mentally, really. It's a lot. It's so easy to hide diabetes. And it's so easy, therefore, then to hide the overwhelm that diabetes presents itself. And when we're not going out in public and we're not eating in restaurants and we're not going to weddings and parties, it's a lot easier to quote unquote control the potential outcome. And so it's sort of like when you're becoming a new mom, oh my gosh, how can I leave the house? Where am I going to give the bottle, change a diaper, breastfeed, all of these what ifs. And it's the same thing with diabetes. And I actually find that so many moms, oh, we've been diagnosed 8 months now. It's like this sort of survival mode. Okay, I think we got this. We're in it. It's almost like this level of postpartum anxiety or depression sort of over the initial hump of the diagnosis, that it's like a year later or 2 years later where the true feelings of whether or not it's isolation or anxiety or realization come in. And this notion of diabetes acceptance, I don't think ever goes away. I speak a lot about that term with clients and groups and families, and that there's with life, there's always a transition, and accepting, this new role that you're in, with diabetes along for the ride can be really, really challenging.
I totally get that. Yeah. Really good point. I want to share what I learned about my feet at my last pedicure appointment. I was told I really needed to do something about my very dry skin and the callus buildup on my feet. Living with type 1 diabetes for 40 plus years now makes it very important to keep my feet in good condition. And from years of running and my barefoot lifestyle was starting to become very evident. And I know how important it is for us to keep our feet and skin in good shape, as infections can easily set in if we're not careful. So I searched and found Rapid Crack Repair Cream from Skin Integra. I was so happy to come across this product. It is made with their patented EpiLipids technology, which are plant-derived oils that are identical in their lipid composition to our skin's own epidermal lipids. So our skin recognizes them and absorbs them rapidly into the barrier. So for a month now, every night before bedtime, I've been applying this Rapid Crack Repair Cream from Skin Integra to my feet, and I'm loving it. It's moisturizing without being greasy, and I really like what it's doing to help my dry, calloused feet and heels and toes to now be healed and protected. And so if you're looking for a cream to heal your dry or cracked skin and hard to treat conditions like diabetes neuropathy, I really recommend this product. You can click the link right here in the show notes and shop Skin Integra's Rapid Crack Repair Cream and just use my code BloodSugarBoss20 and save 20%. I hope you check it out. So, I'm going to circle back to family, and if you could share pregnancy and what was that like for you and what was your experience? You have 2 children.
I have 2 children. Yep. They are 3.5, three-nager, my little boy, and my daughter is almost 6. She is in kindergarten, and they are amazing little devils, but also still love to kind of crawl in bed with me in the morning and watch TV and snuggle. And I'm here for it. Pregnancy, I'm very lucky in the fact that I was very prepared. I was very ready. I was working for the T1D Exchange at the time. I had so much support and encouragement and flexibility in my job and work, and so many people rooting for me, because I had been to all these conferences before, was, very close with people who had kind of paved the way for me mentally and physically to help me, guide me on these journeys where I knew exactly what to expect. I knew there was going to be lows during those first trimester. I knew there was going to be resistance between 24 and 30 weeks or whatnot. So I was mentally ready for the diabetes aspect of it. And I didn't hate it, but it was especially challenging to think about pregnancy and what this transition to motherhood would be like, because I was forcing myself to be so diligent on blood sugars and maintaining, as flat of a line as possible, in order to have the best outcome. And I was able to deliver both my kids vaginally, full term, without, any real NICU time or anything like that.
Nice.
Which is great. And I'm forever thankful for it. But I had a really hard transition to motherhood. I think more so just as a person, not necessarily with diabetes. I had like the postpartum lows. I had all of that. I think for me personally, I was so hyper focused on the diabetes. I really felt like I couldn't process what this sort of new motherhood journey was going to be like. And I still struggle with it today in terms of how do I prioritize and successfully teach my kids about my body and my pump and my diabetes in a safe and a age appropriate way. And it's a constant learning process, especially now that they are completely verbal and starting to read. And it's a fun journey, but it's also scary at the same time.
Yeah. I can relate too. I had one daughter. I shared a little bit about her before we started to record today. And and again, that was a different time. We did not have CGMs back then. And I understand it was ultra, and to be put into that high risk category, the constant testing, the ultrasounds, all in due diligence. I mean, obviously it was for a reason. It helped keep me on track. So I totally get that. And it's funny when you look back, because my daughter's now 27, and those times that you're talking about now, about having that conversation and bringing them into the routine that we have, it just naturally happens. And I see that you're probably figuring that out too. And then it's just another stage. It's almost their growing stage, they're just having to have a growing stage and stages of development with a mom with diabetes. So just
and I will say it is, one of the first, I love everything that you just said, because, it is a phase, it is a stage, and it ebbs and flows. There are stages of, parenting burnout, there are stages of diabetes burnout. And how I get through it is through like my mom tribe to help me with like the sort of normalizing of the tantrums and the three-nager and the 5.5-year-old, like ridiculous emotions and the picky eating and all that stuff. And then I have my diabetes tribe to help me kind of hone in on, the diabetes stuff. And I know that stuff helps me so much. And I have my own therapist, as a therapist, which I encourage everyone to have. But it's definitely phases. One of the first words my son said was pump, and I was like, what are you saying? Because I used to store, I was breastfeeding him, and I would keep my pump, like tucked into my shirt. And I was like, oh, that's really sweet and also sad at the same time. But I also want them to know that like this is part of mommy. And one of the little girls in my daughter's kindergarten class, who's also our neighbor, she wears a pump, and she has an Omnipod and a Dexcom, and she always offers to help her, and it's kind of a cool like bond that they have. And mom feels extra comfortable with her coming for play dates and things like that. So So she sees it at school and sees me with it. So it's fun to be able to teach them little things. And can you unwrap the tape for mommy? And why don't you have to change your arm thing? Why is it only pump change day? And so like they are like full of questions. And sometimes I just want to change my pump on my own and just want that 5 minutes to just do it quick and move on. And then other times I have to stop myself and say, you know what, Anna, like take the minute or two, help them understand and allow them bits and pieces of the change process and use this as like a teaching opportunity for them.
Absolutely. Yes. That's amazing. And, they get to see us and, our children get to see us on a completely different level too. Just to see, the things that we can conquer and strive through. And, it can only help inspire and help them grow as well. So that's something I've definitely seen. And, there's a level of independence too. I think I've noticed that with my daughters. Maybe they had to grow up a little bit quicker because there was a sense of responsibility felt. And I think that's another stage that maybe progresses as they get a little bit older. And, and when she became more independent, where she was able to help. But it's all in all, it's not easy, but it does work out for the good, I feel too.
Yeah, I am very blessed. I have my little girl and my little mama's boy, and I can't ask for much more. And a husband too. He's around, but I feel like he doesn't necessarily know how to help me unless I ask him, because he knows that I sort of live, sleep, breathe diabetes, and I'm so aware and in tune with it. I feel like what I struggle with now is saying, I need 5 minutes to change my site. I'm out of insulin. Please take over bedtime for 5 minutes. And I have a hard time when I see him, struggling to manage both kids when they're at the end of their day, or we're at the end of our parenting rope, and diabetes has to come first. It's again, finding that balance of prioritizing, like, the kid needs a snack or is going to like kick and punch the wall because they're so angry, or do I give insulin to try to correct this, 250 blood sugar? So that's always a challenge, which needs come first. And it's something I'm working on, as a mom for sure. And I know lots of parents struggle with.
Yeah. We appreciate you sharing that. And, even as a therapist and an expert, you're human. You're living.
We're all human. We're all human. Some days I am guilty of waiting till the cartridge says like X and 0, and like waiting an hour after to reconnect it because I just don't want to do diabetes today. And like, it's kind of the same as people without diabetes who like just don't want to go to the gym, or just don't want to, I don't know, like make dinner. It's a little bit of a different, short-term health implication there. But at the end of the day, we are all human. And I know that this little like 1 hour blip of my day that maybe happens a few times a year isn't going to impact my long-term health, because I've been at this for so long. And I trust my body that it will come back to where it needs to be.
There you go. Yes. We always got to look at what we're doing well too. I think it's easy. And you probably noticed this as well, obviously, living with diabetes, is how it impacts and this is kind of an interesting question too, because I want you to share a little bit more about your practice and the patients that you help, and, share a story, if that's something that you're able to do. But the highs and the lows, we are not our normal selves psychologically. I always say that it magnifies our mood. Do you see it yourself, or is it something that comes up with patients that can be, and it obviously interrupts our relationships. It can create tension at home with, all kinds of scenarios.
Yeah. I mean, highs and lows, like putting on my, diabetes educator hat, are disruption in our our whole system. And they're a disruption in our ability to function at 100% from an immune standpoint, from a circulatory standpoint, and our body from a mental standpoint sort of goes in fight or flight. More so, I feel like with low blood sugars, because, there's more of an acute need to address the situation. Personally, when my blood sugar is low, I am hyper and I am talk a mile a minute, and my mom still can pick up on it.
Isn't that funny? Yes.
When my blood sugar is high, I am moody till the cows come home, like super moody, super like PMS like. I know a lot of people can get like that. Like I'm really like sluggish. And if you think about it, there's all this extra sugar running around our bloodstream that brings down our energy level for the most part. Yeah. And it's really hard to pinpoint, especially with kids. Is this diabetes being diabetes, or is this just them being 3 or 10 or 12? There's a lot of hormones at bay when you're talking with almost any age kid, whether it's a preteen or a 3-year-old or, a 20-year-old boy who just, wants to eat 2 cups of spaghetti. So it really depends. I do a lot of work with parents, who are working with kids who are struggling with either sneaking food, or who are really just working through some of the ins and outs of accepting diabetes, and they push boundaries. And I'm so glad that you brought up, what's going well, because, and I do this too as a parent, every time someone says, a compliment to me, or I go to my endocrinologist's office and they say, wow, you're not having that many lows. Like, that's so great. How do you feel about that? And so I always encourage families to not necessarily talk about the highs and lows physically, but, what went well today? What went well today? Focus on what went well. And instead of what's not going well, what do I still need help with? And sort of just that reframe on, what am I trying to work on? Because we're all always trying to work on something. It's about a goal setting opportunity and finding ways to not necessarily fix the issues, but work a little bit towards, achieving what we want, whether it's a 70% time in range, or asking, mom or dad if they can have a snack. Most of the times those sort of button pushing for preteens or even adults is just testing limits and boundaries and exploring, self-identity. And that's what they're supposed to be doing. It's up to us to teach them what is appropriate and using, emotional regulation in our own selves, as opposed to just saying no.
Good point. And maybe to know what questions to ask, or how to ask, so you can better understand the situation, especially with teenagers.
The most important thing, I think, for parents or who are listening to teenagers in general, is just acknowledge them. You don't have to accuse. We never want to accuse, because maybe a blood sugar was low and they were sneaking food. But, we sort of just want to approach the conversation, obviously, when everyone's calm. Usually I recommend either in the car, or at the end of a long day, or in the morning when everyone seems to be not stressed, if that ever exists. I don't know. But it seems like you really like fruit snacks. Like, do you want me to buy some more? You don't have to mention anything about diabetes, nothing at all. And I guarantee at some point it will come up. You may not get to the answer of the question that you're hoping for in that statement, but what we're trying to do here is allow kids to sort of, and teenagers and adults too, to just think. We want them to build that ability to think about those decisions that they may have said, they're not likely going to respond with the exact statement like, yeah, I'm sorry, mom, I was sneaking food and I know I shouldn't have. Like if a 12-year-old said that, I question their
Shocked, right?
moral functioning. Like
Right.
most 12-year-olds don't think like that, and we can't expect them to. And I think that's the challenge with diabetes, is that we are constantly as adults thinking if this then that, and their brains are just not there yet. So really acknowledging and asking more kind of thought-provoking questions can really go a long way, and you can bring it back up again like a day or two later, because really what you're trying to get at is getting them to critically think about what's going on in their head and not necessarily expect a response right out of the gate.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, just to give them an opportunity to look closer at their own decisions without pointing the finger, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
that's really good.
Yeah.
Now, do you have any patient stories, examples that you can share? I love this conversation. It's so real, and in just what we can all relate to, whether we are, you're talking directly to us as women or mothers with, obviously somebody with diabetes in the home, or maybe a spouse with diabetes. There's so many different, family dynamics, like you said. But if you have a story that you could share just to give us some hope and inspiration, because we need more of that, don't we?
Sure do. There's one guy that I've been working with for a long time, and he reached out looking for some help, recognized that he was pretty depressed. And what I have gotten him to sort of, I think, uncover in his own background is sort of this idea. I don't want to necessarily use the word like reparenting, but so much of how we live our lives is based off of the experiences and the behaviors and the conversations of our own upbringing. Mm-hmm. And he is paranoid about having children and passing along, the thought of diabetes to his family. And what he has been able to do is, work through his own emotions and really accept diabetes for what it is. And I think that is the first part of any sort of mental health journey, is just acknowledging that you have these feelings, and that it's okay to have the feelings. It's the reactions and the responses and what we do with those feelings that really is what matters more. If we choose to not accept diabetes and then just isolate and become depressed and, whatnot, that's one way to address the feelings. And if we accept the feelings for what they are and lean into them and figure out a way to cope with them, which oftentimes involves, whether it's journaling or going to a support group, I have seen such growth and difference with him in terms of just the way he's able to open up about his feelings. Yeah. And especially men. I've been working with so many young men who are in college who have had this sort of mental health challenge in the last, year or so. The mom, like full disclosure, has reached out on their behalf, but I think there is something with men right now where I'm so blessed to be able to work with them, because it isn't every day that men are feeling this sense of vulnerability to share their emotion. So I just encourage any male or woman to reach out for help and just recognize that there is power in some of that talk therapy.
Absolutely. Yes. And bonus, if they decide to give you a call and work with you, this is such a huge advantage, I think, with what we're both doing, is the fact that we live with type 1 and not saying that there's not other qualified counselors out there and mental health help. But yeah, we do make that difference. The fact that we can definitely connect, and I think that's the biggest feedback I get from the women I coach is, is that you get it. You get it, and not only do they get to talk with somebody with diabetes, but then they get that next level of, support, accountability. And it's just golden. It's so good.
I will say so many people come to me with, oh, so I'm actually already seeing a therapist, but they don't get diabetes. Mm-hmm. And I actually love that because it means and I don't want to say it makes my job easier, but they're already at the point where they recognize this level of need of self-care and need for support. And they're just taking it one step further, which is great, because right now what I'm able to offer is only virtual online appointments. So I can see people essentially all over the world. I have a client in Australia, seeing clients in Bermuda. So there's definitely support out there, wherever you need it. You just kind of look for it.
Yes. And just like you say, decide that this is what you need now and search and reach and seek it. So yeah, definitely. Well, Anna, is there anything else that you wanted to share before we say goodbye for today?
At the end of the day, I really just encourage people, even if they don't end up following through with whether it's therapy or coaching or some sort of mental health approach now, I love it when actually families or adults reach out and they just have a 15-minute consult with me. A lot of the times they don't move forward right then and there. Many times they love the conversation. I'm going to reach back out to you in a year or so, or thanks so much for chatting with me. Mm-hmm. Right now, I don't think we need the services, but I'm definitely going to reach back out if and when we do, because that's just the sign that you are open to the opportunity. And I think that's my number one piece of advice. Just be open to connecting with someone who gets it.
Yeah, perfect. I appreciate that, Anna. You have been a pleasure to talk to. And,
likewise.
It's been nice to get to know you. And now your practice is called, and I love the name of your practice, Finding Smiles Coaching.
It is the name of a song that we sang at the end of Campfire at my diabetes camp. Written and sung by someone living with type 1, and I just really love it. So
yes, I love.
Feel free to find me online. I'm sure you'll share all the details.
We sure will. Going to link everything in the show notes. So yes, and you definitely find Anna on Instagram, and we will link her website and how you can reach out if you want to take that next step. We really appreciate you, and I'd love to have you back another time.
Thanks so much. It was great to connect.
Same here. Well, thank you again, and we will see you here next week. Thank you for listening to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. Head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. And be sure to check us out at abundanthealthwithmelissa.com for our free resources. See you next week.